Hey there. Hope you're ready for a deep dive into a situation that proves truth is stranger than fiction, and often way more complicated. We're talking India and Canada, two countries that were, though recently, on pretty good terms.
And recently is the key word here. We're not talking about some long-standing feud. This chill hit fast. And it goes way beyond just diplomats clearing their throats at each other. This impacts global players, billions of dollars, and yes, even you. There are ways you might not expect.
Okay, so for anyone just tuning in, set the scene for us. Canada and India. Historically, what's the deal?
It's on the surface pretty friendly. Canada has a large Indian diaspora. Trade has been booming. Cultural exchange programs, the works. But beneath that surface, well, there's history. And like with any good story, context is everything.
And that context involves a man named Hardeep Singh Nijjar. He was a Canadian Sikh leader, assassinated here in Canada in mid-2023. Now, normally, that's a tragedy, a police matter. But then, Trudeau dropped a bombshell.
Publicly pointing fingers at India, suggesting their involvement in Nijjar's death. Now, you gotta understand, accusations like this between nations, not made lightly. It'd be like accusing your neighbor of something awful at a block party. The stakes just skyrocketed.
And India's response?
Categorically denied any involvement. Called the accusations absurd. But here's where things get really interesting for your critical thinking hats out there. Why would Trudeau make such an accusation, knowing it'd cause a huge rift, unless he had something concrete to back it up?
Okay, intrigue level rising. So, we've got this assassination, accusations, denials. But at the heart of it all is this idea of Khalistan. Nijjar was a supporter. And it's a major point of contention between India and Canada. Give us the lowdown. What is Khalistan, and why is it such a big deal?
In the simplest terms, Khalistan is the idea of an independent Sikh homeland carved out of India's Punjab region. The movement advocating for it goes way back, saw its peak in the 80s with actual militant groups. Now, for India, this is a non-starter, a threat to their national unity, full stop.
Makes sense. Countries don't tend to love the idea of their territory being split up. But where does Canada fit into this? We've got a large Sikh population.
Right, exactly. And that's where the balancing act begins. Canada, with its emphasis on freedom of speech, allows for the peaceful advocacy of Khalistan by some groups within its borders. Now, India sees this as Canada harboring potential threats, while Canada maintains it's about protecting free speech, not endorsing violence.
Okay, so we've got historical baggage, present-day tragedy, and a huge ideological clash all rolled into one. No wonder things got frosty fast.
And it's not just talk. This situation has real-world consequences. We're talking visa suspensions, travel advisories warning Canadians about going to India and vice versa. Imagine the impact. Families separated, business deals on hold, students' plans disrupted. This isn't some diplomatic game. It's affecting real lives.
As I was going to say, this isn't just headlines and talking heads. This is hitting home for people. And economically, whoa, India is a huge trading partner for Canada. What's the fallout looking like on that front?
Billions of dollars hanging in the balance. Companies on both sides are sweating it out because the truth is, both countries need each other economically. India is a growing market for Canadian goods, and Canada is a key source of investment for India. But will pragmatism win out over this political standoff? The jury's still out.
And it's not like it's just between us. The whole world's watching this unfold, trying to figure out where they stand. The U.S., for example, must be having a field day with this.
Oh, absolutely. Talk about stuck between a rock and a hard place. The U.S. needs India as an ally in the Indo-Pacific, especially with all the tension surrounding China. But Canada is a close ally and a member of the G7. Talk about a diplomatic tightrope walk.
So they're trying to keep everyone happy without picking sides. But isn't that kind of impossible? I feel like someone have to be unhappy here.
Right, exactly. And that's where those critical thinking skills we're always talking about come in handy. Because anyone listening to this, you're not just receiving news, you're being bombarded with narratives.
From both governments, from the media, from people with their own agendas online. It's like everyone wants you to pick a side.
Precisely. So, how do you navigate this? By asking the right questions. Who benefits from the situation escalating? What are the underlying motivations at play here?
Ooh, good point. Like, it's an election year in Canada.
Right.
Could this situation be influencing things on that front?
Absolutely something to consider. And on the Indian side, they have their own internal politics and upcoming elections as well. Always look at the bigger picture and the potential motivations behind the actions of those involved.
It's not just about what they're saying, but why they might be saying it at this particular moment.
Exactly. And here's another question to ask yourself. Are you getting the full story? or just one side of it. We've talked about the Khalistan movement from the perspective of India and Canada, but what about the perspective of those who actually support an independent Khalistan?
Right. Hearing from them would give us a much more well-rounded understanding of the issue. It's like that classic advice, don't just read the headline. Read the whole article, and even then, maybe read a few articles from different sources.
Exactly. And when you are reading those articles, ask yourself, are the claims being made backed up by evidence? Are the sources credible? Don't just take someone's word for it, even if they sound confident or have fancy titles.
And this is where things get tricky.
Right.
Because who investigates an assassination like this when it involves two countries? What does that investigation even look like?
It's incredibly complex. You have different jurisdictions, legal systems,
Yeah.
political pressure. It's not going to be an open and shut case. And that's why. As this story develops, you're going to see conflicting narratives emerge.
See, this is why I like having you here to break this down. Because I think when something like this happens, it's easy to get swept up in the emotions of it all. It's serious. An assassination, accusations, international fallout. You feel like you have to pick a side.
Absolutely. And that's human nature. But remember, things aren't always black and white. There are nuances, complexities we might not see at first glance.
Okay. So how do we, as engaged listeners, as people who want to stay informed but also be critical thinkers,
Yeah.
how do we navigate this? Give us the toolkit.
I'm happy to. First and foremost, be aware of your own biases. Are you only consuming information that confirms what you already believe? If so, you're doing yourself a disservice. Actively seek out diverse sources, even and especially if they challenge your initial assumptions.
This is where even for someone like me who devours news, it's easy to get overwhelmed.
Yeah.
Because it's not just about being informed, it's about not getting played.
Yeah.
We've talked about political motivations, but then there's the whole media ecosystem. How much this is being spun for clicks, for ratings.
Oh, you've hit on a huge G point. This situation is a masterclass in media literacy because you've got outlets with their own political leanings. You've got social media algorithms feeding you what they think you want to see. It's an echo chamber if you're not careful.
So what's the antidote? Besides, throwing our phones into the ocean and becoming hermits.
Tempting as that sounds, here's a more practical approach. Diversify your media diet. Don't just rely on one news source, even if you trust them. Expose yourself to different perspectives, even if they initially make you uncomfortable.
Because discomfort is often a sign that we're challenging our own biases, right?
Exactly. Think of it like this. If you're only listening to people who agree with you all the time,
Yeah.
how are you ever going to grow or learn anything new?
Okay, that's a great way to put it. It's like if you're always eating the same food, you might think you hate broccoli, but you've never actually tried it. So diversify those news sources. Got it. What else can we as critical listeners do to make sense of this whole India-Canada situation?
Well, remember how we talked about the importance of understanding the motivations of those involved? That applies to us as consumers of information too. Ask yourself, why am I reading this article? Why am I following this commentator? What are their motivations?
Oh, that's interesting. Like, are they trying to genuinely inform me, or are they trying to push a certain narrative?
Exactly. And once you start asking those questions, you start to see through the spin and get to the heart of the matter. You become a more discerning consumer of information, which is crucial in today's world.
It feels like the stakes are higher than ever, right? I mean, it used to be that misinformation spread slowly, but now it's like wildfire online.
And that's why critical thinking skills are so crucial, because it's not just about being skeptical of everything you read. It's about knowing how to evaluate information, how to separate fact from fiction, and how to form your own informed opinions.
Which, let's be real, takes effort. It's way easier to just scroll through headlines and react.
It absolutely is. But that's the thing. Being a well-informed citizen isn't always easy. It takes work, it takes engagement, and it takes a willingness to ask tough questions even of ourselves.
Okay, so we've been given the tools, diversify our news diets, think critically about motivations, and remember that discomfort can be a sign of growth. Now let's bring it back to the heart of this deep dive, India and Canada. Where do things go from here?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? It's a complex situation with no easy answers. But here's something to keep in mind as you continue to follow this story. Look beyond the immediate headlines and consider the long-term implications.
Like, how will this impact the relationship between these two countries going forward?
Exactly. Will they be able to repair the damage that's been done? Or will this escalate into a full-blown diplomatic crisis? And what will that mean for the global community, for the balance of power, for issues like trade and security?
And for the average person, what should they be watching for? What are the signs that things are getting better or worse?
Pay attention to the diplomatic channels. Are there talks happening behind the scenes? Are there attempts at de-escalation? On the other hand, are sanctions being imposed? Are more countries being pulled into this conflict? These are all indicators of where things might be headed.
It's like a geopolitical chess match, and we're all watching with bated breath. So listener name there, you have it, a deep dive into the India-Canada tensions, the historical context, the global implications, and most importantly, the critical thinking tools you need to navigate this complex and rapidly evolving situation.
Remember, in a world awash in information, the ability to think critically is your most valuable asset.
We'll be back next week with another deep dive into a topic that's shaping our world. Until then, stay curious, stay informed, and most importantly, stay critical.